Picture this. You're walking through a crowded city street, neon lights flickering, digital billboards screaming, people glued to their devices. Conversations blur into an incoherent hum of rage, fear, and distraction. Everyone seems awake, yet a strange emptiness pulses beneath the surface. A collective stupor. You ask yourself, how did we get here? Why do intelligent solutions exist, yet we consistently choose chaos, tribalism, and ignorance? This is not mere frustration. It is an unsettling psychological reality. We live in the age of mass psychosis. No, this isn't a conspiracy theory reserved for dark corners of the internet. It is a phenomenon that has been unfolding quietly, subtly, yet with relentless force. Carl Jung once warned, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived life of the parent." Extend that metaphor to society. The greatest tragedy of our age is the unlived consciousness of the collective. We are surrounded by people who, paradoxically, possess the tools for clarity, reason, and insight, yet choose oblivion, distraction, or ideological comfort. Consider the paradox. Knowledge is more accessible than ever. Every answer to a question exists at our fingertips. And yet, misinformation spreads faster than light. Social validation replaces truth. Logic bows to emotion. People are not just uninformed, they are actively disengaging from reality, trapped in loops of social approval that reward stupidity over insight. You've seen it. Arguments on social media where reason is abandoned for memes, outrage, or shallow affirmations. The spectacle is not just frustrating. It is contagious. This is where the term mass psychosis becomes chillingly literal. In psychiatry, psychosis represents a break from reality. Transpose this to society. Millions, even billions, participating in collective hallucinations, markets inflated by hype, ideologies sustained by fear, health choices dictated by misinformation, and moral panics amplified by algorithms. Aldous Huxley captured this eerily in Brave New World. Most human beings have an almost infinite capacity for taking things for granted. Humanity's intelligence is not failing because of a lack of knowledge. It is failing because of apathy, herd conformity, and cognitive surrender. Now, consider the emotional toll. You may feel isolated, frustrated, or even enraged. Perhaps you've asked yourself, am I the only one seeing the truth? The answer is both liberating and terrifying. No, you are not alone, but the awakening comes with a price. Society is not designed to reward clarity. It punishes insight. Standing outside the mass psychosis means navigating a world where your mental sharpness becomes a burden, your questions a threat to comfort, and your awareness a lonely path. But there is a sliver of hope hidden in this existential chaos. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." The first step to escaping mass psychosis is not to fight the crowd blindly. It is to awaken to the truth of the crowd, to see the invisible chains of thought imposed by collective illusions, to question the narratives that feel like common sense, to understand that intelligence alone does not inoculate you from manipulation. Recognition is the first step toward liberation. By the time you finish reading this section, the question lingers like smoke in the lungs. If the world is drowning in stupidity, what does it mean to truly think? And more urgently, how do we break free before our minds become collateral damage? The answers are neither easy nor comforting, but they begin with clarity, a willingness to confront the collective nightmare and acknowledge the intoxicating seduction of ignorance. If you thought the first glimpse of mass psychosis was disturbing, the deeper truth is far more unsettling. Intelligence does not inoculate against it. In fact, the very traits that make someone capable of reason, creativity, empathy, abstract thought, can be weaponized by collective delusions. Why? Because humans are wired for connection, and connection often demands conformity. We are social animals, and the instinct to belong can overpower the instinct to think. Consider the paradox through history. Nations have marched blindly into war, economies have collapsed under speculative frenzy, ideologies have consumed entire populations, all not because people were uninformed, but because they were entangled in social feedback loops that normalized irrationality. Friedrich Nietzsche warned, "Madness is rare in individuals, but in groups, parties, nations, and ages, It is the rule. What seems like individual folly is often a symptom of a collective pathology. Modern life has accelerated this contagion. Social media is the petri dish where ignorance multiplies unchecked. Algorithms are designed to maximize engagement, not truth. Outrage, sensationalism, and shallow convictions travel faster than careful reasoning. You've witnessed it. Intelligent people reduced to caricatures in comment sections. Entire communities echoing simplistic narratives, while nuance collapses under the weight of emotional contagion. The result is a psychological state akin to herd hallucination, where reality becomes negotiable and skepticism is socially punished. The mechanics are frighteningly simple. First, repetition creates familiarity. Ideas repeated often enough gain legitimacy, regardless of their truth. Second, emotional arousal overrides critical thinking. Fear, anger, or excitement short-circuit rational analysis, making the brain highly suggestible. Third, social validation creates feedback loops. If everyone around you endorses a belief, dissent feels not only lonely but dangerous. Viktor Frankl described this phenomenon in Man's Search for Meaning. When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with trivialities. Collective psychosis feeds on this need for distraction and purpose, substituting shallow narratives for profound understanding. Even the brightest minds are not immune. Arthur Schopenhauer observed, "Talent hits a target no one else can hit. Genius hits a target no one else can see. Yet genius can be trapped by the same social currents as everyone else, because awareness alone does not prevent manipulation." Highly intelligent individuals may see the cracks in the system, but without emotional resilience and conscious autonomy, they too fall prey to ideological echo chambers, confirmation bias, or moral panic. And then there is the silent killer, complacency. Watching the madness unfold can breed cynicism, resignation, or a passive sense of inevitability. Many people, even when recognizing the insanity, choose comfort over confrontation. They shrug, participate reluctantly, or distract themselves with trivial pursuits, allowing the collective psychosis to intensify. This is why mass stupidity is not merely a cultural failure. It is a psychological epidemic, a virus of perception, infecting minds with astonishing efficiency. The question emerges, heavy and urgent. If intelligence alone cannot shield you, how do you break the cycle? How can one navigate a society where reality is constantly refracted through distorted lenses of fear, ego, and conformity? The answer lies not only in understanding the mechanics of mass psychosis, but in cultivating inner resistance, a form of mental immunity built on self-awareness, rigorous questioning, and the courage to stand apart. By examining how the madness spreads, we glimpse the architecture of collective stupidity: repetition, emotional hijacking, social conformity, and the seductive comfort of ignorance. Recognizing the pattern is the first step, but recognition alone is insufficient. To survive and ultimately thrive requires a deliberate and disciplined approach to reclaiming clarity in a world that thrives on confusion. Why do so many intelligent individuals, even those capable of critical thinking, willingly step into the river of collective stupidity? It is a question that stings because the answer hits close to home. We are wired for comfort, not clarity. Intelligence is seductive, but so too is the illusion of safety, acceptance, and emotional ease. To resist the herd is to endure isolation, conflict, and existential unease. And for most people, avoidance wins over awareness. Human psychology is remarkably adaptable, but often in the wrong ways. Jean-Paul Sartre observed, "Hell is other people, but in this context, hell is also ourselves, our fear of judgment, our craving for approval, our aversion to uncertainty." A person may recognize the absurdity of popular beliefs, yet the discomfort of dissent can be unbearable. Conformity becomes a protective mechanism, a psychological anesthetic that shields the mind from the anxiety of standing alone. Even genius cannot fully escape this pull. The brighter the mind, the sharper the isolation it risks by rejecting the consensus. Cognitive biases act like invisible chains. Confirmation bias ensures we seek out ideas that validate our preconceptions. Bandwagon effects trick us into mistaking popularity for truth. Availability heuristics make recent, emotionally charged events feel universal. Together, these biases create a false sense of reality, a curated world in which stupidity seems not only normal but necessary. Viktor Frankl warned that between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. Yet, most of humanity unconsciously narrows that space, allowing instinct, fear, and social pressure to dictate thought. The comfort of stupidity is also ideological. Dogmas, moral absolutism, and political tribalism provide easy answers to complex questions. They demand little reflection, no moral courage, and allow people to outsource responsibility for reasoning. Aldous Huxley's vision of a controlled, distracted society resonates here. The secret of genius is to carry the spirit of the child into old age, which means never losing your enthusiasm. Yet the crowd sacrifices enthusiasm for certainty, curiosity for conformity, and insight for reassurance. The result is an entire society numbed, habituated to mediocrity and deception. Isolation is the consequence, but it is also the doorway to freedom. Recognizing the psychological seduction of collective stupidity forces a choice: continue to drift with the crowd or consciously step away. This is not merely intellectual. It is existential. Carl Jung argued, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." To awaken in a world drowning in ignorance requires confronting the darkness of discomfort, anxiety, and social estrangement. It is painful, but it is also the first real act of liberation. We are not simply dealing with misinformation, laziness, or cruelty. We are facing an active surrender to comfort, a surrender that feels rational in the moment. Smart people succumb not because they lack intelligence, but because the psychological cost of awareness is immense. It is easier to laugh with the crowd, to nod along, to anesthetize one's mind with spectacle, gossip, or trivial entertainment. And yet, the price is a slow erosion of clarity, autonomy, and moral agency. The stakes are profound. If society is drifting deeper into mass psychosis, the individual who refuses to follow the herd becomes a rare and precarious island of consciousness. Awareness alone is not enough. It must be paired with strategies to navigate the sea of stupidity without being engulfed. The question now evolves: if comfort keeps humanity chained, how can one cultivate resistance without succumbing to despair, loneliness, or rage? The first step in resisting mass psychosis is recognizing that the battlefield is internal as much as it is external. Clarity is not found in outrage or isolation, but in deliberate cultivation of thought, awareness, and emotional resilience. To navigate a world addicted to distraction and conformity, one must treat their mind as a sovereign territory, guarded, disciplined, and conscious. Begin with observation. In a world that insists on noise, the simple act of quiet attention becomes revolutionary. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how. Your why is your anchor, the internal compass that allows you to discern truth from the seductive illusions propagated by others. Start by noticing patterns. Which ideas repeat mindlessly in your environment? Which narratives elicit emotion before reason? By observing without immediate judgment, you cultivate a distance from the collective hysteria, a critical buffer that allows independent thought to emerge." Next comes intellectual hygiene. Just as the body requires nutrition and exercise, the mind requires careful input. Avoid the constant flood of algorithmically optimized content designed to trigger emotion and conformity. Seek instead diverse perspectives, challenge your own assumptions, and interrogate the premises you've long taken for granted. Arthur Schopenhauer cautioned, "All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as self-evident." If clarity feels uncomfortable or isolated, it is often a sign that you are moving toward the truth. Emotional regulation is equally critical. Mass psychosis thrives on fear, outrage, and anxiety, hijacking reason and weakening resistance. Mindfulness, reflection, and deliberate breathing are not mere self-help cliches. They are tools to reclaim the space between stimulus and reaction. Viktor Frankl emphasized that between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. By mastering this space, you create immunity against the herd's emotional contagion. Another vital practice is selective engagement. It is not enough to simply think differently. You must also act strategically in a world designed to punish insight. Engage with ideas, communities, and media that foster depth and autonomy. Withdraw from environments that reinforce mindless repetition, triviality, or emotional manipulation. Protect your attention like the precious resource it is. What you feed grows, and what you ignore withers. Finally, cultivate moral courage. Resistance to mass psychosis is not just intellectual, it is ethical. The simplest truths often require defiance of social norms, even ridicule. Aldous Huxley warned, "Facts do not cease to exist because they are ignored. Recognizing truth without acting, or at least living in accordance with it, allows the surrounding madness to subtly erode your integrity." Courage is not the absence of fear, but the persistence of clarity and action despite it. These strategies converge into a single principle: autonomy. To reclaim your mind is to recognize that intelligence alone does not suffice. Freedom is not given, it must be consciously seized. Observing, questioning, regulating, engaging selectively, and acting with courage form the pillars of resistance. The challenge is enormous because society conspires, subtly yet persistently, to lure you back into the comfortable trance of conformity. By developing these practices, you begin to build a personal ecosystem of clarity, one that protects against the flood of collective stupidity. Yet, awareness and strategy are just the beginning. The deeper struggle lies in sustaining this state amidst social pressure, moral ambiguity, and the relentless pull of distraction. This is where philosophy, psychology, and lived experience converge, offering both insight and tools for survival. The question now becomes existential. If clarity and freedom require constant effort, how can one sustain them in a world designed to erode both? The answer begins with understanding the inner architecture of mass psychosis itself and the human vulnerabilities it exploits. Escaping mass psychosis is not a one-time act, it is a continuous journey. Awareness, observation, and selective engagement form the foundation, but resilience is what allows clarity to endure amidst relentless social, emotional, and ideological pressure. Without resilience, even the sharpest mind can be eroded by isolation, cynicism, or the seductive pull of conformity. Resilience begins with self-mastery. Nietzsche cautioned, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." In the context of mass psychosis, the monsters are not other people. They are the internalized fears, biases, and compulsions that society exploits. To resist, one must cultivate discipline over thought, emotion, and action. This involves rigorous reflection, honest self-assessment, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about one's own tendencies toward conformity or avoidance. Philosophical grounding is equally vital. Existentialist thought provides both clarity and courage. Sartre's insistence on radical freedom reminds us that, even in oppressive social climates, we are responsible for our choices. Viktor Frankl's insights on meaning highlight that purpose can serve as an anchor when the world feels absurd or insane. When society rewards distraction, fear, and shallow gratification, meaning becomes a compass. It allows one to navigate chaos without losing moral or intellectual bearings. Intellectual and emotional independence are two sides of the same coin. Intellectual independence is the refusal to accept truth by authority, consensus, or convenience. Emotional independence is the ability to feel without being consumed, to empathize without surrendering judgment, and to endure discomfort without capitulation. Aldous Huxley emphasized this duality when he wrote, "Experience is not what happens to you. It's what you do with what happens to you." Resistance is not passive. It is the active cultivation of clarity, discernment, and purpose in every thought and interaction. Community, paradoxically, also plays a role. Total isolation is unsustainable and can harden the mind into cynicism. Seek out communities or individuals who prize thoughtfulness over conformity. Dialogue with others who challenge, Rather than comfort, your ideas sharpens insight. But caution is essential. Even these communities must be evaluated constantly for intellectual honesty, emotional maturity, and independence from herd thinking. Finally, resilience requires ethical courage. Mass psychosis is as much moral as it is cognitive. To survive without succumbing to despair or bitterness, one must align behavior with awareness. Carl Jung's insight resonates here. Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. The awakened mind does not merely observe the madness. It acts, thoughtfully and deliberately, in ways that reflect its values, even if that path is lonely or opposed. The result is a paradoxical state. Deeply connected to reality yet detached from the herd, emotionally engaged yet free from manipulation, aware of collective folly yet anchored in meaning. This is not a utopia, it is a disciplined, conscious form of survival, a mental ecosystem that protects insight while enabling action. Those who cultivate it do not merely avoid the descent into mass psychosis. They thrive in clarity, autonomy, and ethical integrity. As we prepare to explore the final, most critical dimension, the existential and spiritual liberation that comes from complete detachment from collective stupidity, we must confront the ultimate question. Can humanity at large awaken, or is the survival of consciousness destined to be the work of the few who dare to resist? The answer lies not in statistics or theory, but in the inner cultivation of freedom, clarity, and resilience, the very traits that define a life beyond the herd. At this stage, survival is no longer enough. Awareness, discipline, and resilience protect the mind, but they are scaffolding, not the pinnacle. The final step is transcendence, a state in which the individual is fully awake, free from the psychic pull of the collective, yet not alienated from life itself. This is where philosophy, psychology, and spirituality converge into the ultimate liberation. Thinking clearly, living ethically, and perceiving truth untainted by herd delusion. To transcend, one must embrace radical detachment. Not cynicism or nihilism, but clarity of perception. Friedrich Nietzsche warned, "Invisible threads are the strongest ties." The invisible threads binding us to collective ignorance are subtle, seductive, and often invisible even to the most vigilant minds. Recognizing them requires constant self-interrogation. Which beliefs are truly mine? Which emotions are mine, and which are borrowed from the crowd? Which actions serve clarity and meaning, and which serve approval or convenience? This self-questioning is uncomfortable, relentless, but ultimately liberating. Equally vital is the cultivation of inner purpose. Viktor Frankl's insight in man's search for meaning remains profoundly relevant. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Transcendence does not require changing the world. It begins by changing one's engagement with it. In a society addicted to distraction, fear, and ideological spectacle, the transcendent mind navigates life as a conscious participant, not a passive passenger. Every choice, every thought, every reaction is an exercise in autonomy and moral clarity. Emotional mastery is the bridge between survival and transcendence. Mass psychosis thrives on emotional hijacking, fear, outrage, and tribal loyalty. To rise above the herd, one must cultivate equanimity without indifference, compassion without manipulation, and engagement without surrender. Aldous Huxley captured this balance. Perhaps the secret of happiness is not to seek more, but to develop the capacity to enjoy less. Simplicity, focus, and intentionality are not sacrifices. They are shields against the pervasive chaos of collective stupidity. Finally, transcendence is ethical in essence. It is not merely escaping the herd intellectually, but living with integrity amidst a world that prizes conformity. Carl Jung's wisdom resonates with urgency. Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. By illuminating our own mind, we gain the power to act ethically, to resist manipulation, and to influence without succumbing to the herd's insanity. This path is not easy. It demands courage, discipline, and relentless self-examination. It is lonely at times and dangerous at others, because society rarely rewards clarity or courage. Yet those who commit to it achieve a rare and profound freedom: the ability to see reality unfiltered, think critically, and act purposefully. They become the conscious nodes in a network dominated by unconscious thought, capable of creating meaning, beauty, and ethical impact in a world teetering on the edge of collective stupidity. The ultimate question remains: will humanity awaken, or will the majority continue to drift, numbed by comfort, distraction, and conformity? For those who choose transcendence, the answer is irrelevant. Liberation begins in the mind, expands into action, and radiates into life. In a society suffocating under the weight of its own psychosis, the transcendent individual stands as a beacon, a living demonstration that clarity, autonomy, and ethical courage are possible, even amidst overwhelming stupidity.